Maiden are easily one of the greatest heavy metal bands of all time, and are definitely one of my top bands ever. Their sound is extremely unique, and barely any other bands have replicated that sound ever. Yes, you heard me right. No other bands have captured the style of Iron Maiden, including the new wave of British heavy metal bands like Judas Priest, Grim Reaper, and Saxon. You may think these bands are similar to Iron Maiden, but I'm here to tell you that they are not. That's because Iron Maiden's songwriting style doesn't mainly involve riffs. Their guitar work mostly consists of guitar lines, harmonizing melodies, and usually gallops. Just listen to like any Iron Maiden song. Does their guitar work really sound like Judas Priest, Saxon, or like literally any other band ever? Absolutely not. Iron Maiden's style is completely unique on its own, and if you try to replicate that style, you will just come off as a complete rip-off. That is how great and unique this band is. Today I will be ranking all 16 of their albums from worst to best, and I am a really sincere fan of this band. I feel like some Iron Maiden fans are annoying and pretty nitpicky in the band. I see some of these fans disregard songs only for some really minor reasons, and I feel like some of these fans are too nosed into the band and don't really appreciate other bands. But I am different from these people. I am a huge Maiden fan, but I'm also a really big fan of Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, and Kiss, and to be honest, I kind of like these bands better than Maiden. Basically what I'm saying is that you guys can trust me and my opinions. I basically like almost every Iron Maiden album, and my musical range is really wide and diverse. I can basically like almost all metal genres, including death metal, hair metal, and sometimes psychedelic progressive rock. I tend to usually like everything, and I like a lot of stuff Iron Maiden has done, even the albums that fans have bashed on. Alright, enough blabbering, let's rank these bad boys. Okay, I will admit, I'm not a huge fan of this album, but I will tell you guys, I do like Blaze Bayley quite a bit. His band before he joined Iron Maiden, Wolfsbane, is really good, and I am a pretty big fan of the X Factor, which I do think Blaze fits in well in, but to be honest, he doesn't really fit in Virtual 11. The difference between the X Factor and Virtual 11 is that Virtual 11 actually sounds like classic Maiden, and Blaze definitely doesn't fit the sound of classic Maiden in my opinion. I would have much preferred Bruce on vocals in this album, but Blaze isn't the main problem in this album. The issue I have with this is the songwriting, mainly Steve Harris, because he wrote most of the tracks on here. The songwriting to me is pretty lackluster compared to what they have done before. Some of these songs are not very interesting or are very long for absolutely no reason whatsoever. First of all, The Angel and the Gambler is clearly the worst Iron Maiden song ever. I have no idea what Steve Harris was thinking. The chorus repeats 22 fucking times. It's basically the whole song, and the song is 10 fucking minutes. What the hell? Then there is Lightning Strikes Twice, which isn't bad, but it's pretty uninteresting to me. The Educated Fool I'm also not a big fan of, and Don't Look to the Eyes of a Stranger. This song almost pulled An Angel and the Gambler by having pretty repetitive sections, but at least this song has some good guitar work, and a really amazing payoff. The middle section is like fucking speed metal, might be the fastest section Iron Maiden has ever played. It's really the only reason to listen to this song. Those songs are pretty much the stinkers of this album, but I pretty much like everything else on here. Future Real is a pretty kick-ass opening track. Como Estes Amigos is a pretty good ballad, but there are two songs I think are absolutely amazing. One of them is When Two Worlds Collide. This is a gallop kind of song, and I think it is really good. I really like the melodies, the chorus is pretty good, the song is structured well, and it has a really good middle section. This is definitely a highlight track from the Blaze era.
Collision course, you must believe it's true. Now there's nothing left that we can do when two worlds collide. The anger and the pain of all those who remain.
The best track on this album is obviously The Klansman. This is easily one of the best songs Iron Maiden has ever wrote, but I will say, Blaze doesn't really fit this song. I recommend you check out the 2001 Rock in Rio version, with Bruce Dickinson on vocals. That version is way better, and this song is definitely meant for Bruce to sing. This song has the perfect song structure for an Iron Maiden epic. It has a really badass chorus, and amazing sections throughout. This song is a must listen, especially the Rock in Rio version. Overall, Virtual 11 has to be my least favorite Maiden album, mainly because of Blaze Bayley not really fitting in with the music and that the songwriting isn't very great. Except for a few tracks, even though this is my least favorite, I still recommend all Iron Maiden fans to at least give this another chance. This is a listenable album and there's a chance you might like it, at least a few songs. I also don't think this album is very strong in the Iron Maiden discography, but I will say, I do like how this album sounds, I do like the production, and I like the theme they were going for here, but to me this album has some major issues, one of them being Bruce Dickinson. At this point he really cannot sing in his high register anymore, and every time he does, which is a lot in this album, it doesn't really sound good. I wish he sang in a lower register way more often in this album, because he really sounds old and tired trying to hit those high notes. But that's not the main issue in this album. My main issue is the songwriting. You have a ton of tracks that feel like they drag on for a while, and there are a lot of boring moments on here I feel like. The first example being the first track. Why did you have to combine Satellite 15 and The Final Frontier into one song? Satellite 15 is one of the most boring and pointless intros I have ever heard, and it goes on for 4 minutes, which is way too long. They should have separated the tracks, or even better cut Satellite 15 from the album. But the actual song The Final Frontier is a pretty decent track, but I don't find it to be very special. I'm not a big fan of El Dorado either. The Gallop is cool, I guess, but I really don't like the chorus where Bruce tries to sing really high notes. It just doesn't sound good. Mother of Mercy is a pretty cool track. I do like the melodies, but yet again, I don't like Bruce's singing in the chorus, but it's a cool song. Coming Home is a pretty good ballad, but it doesn't reach me like some of Iron Maiden's other ballads. The Alchemist is one of the great songs from this album to me. It's really up-tempo and Bruce does a pretty good performance singing in his lower range. The melodies are also great, and the solo in the middle is pretty amazing. This is definitely a highlight track from this album.
My dreams of empire, but my frozen queen will come to pass. Know me, the mages, I am Dr. D, and this is my house.
But then, we get to the second half of this album, which is all epics. All of these tracks are over 7 minutes, and this is really where the songwriting takes its toll. You have Isle of Avalon, which is probably the worst song on this album, and I find it to be one of Maiden's worst tracks. There is a 3-minute intro, which isn't very interesting, and the verse and chorus of this song I'm not really a fan of. This song also doesn't have a good payoff. If you think it starts to go somewhere, it just plays the intro and the verse and chorus over again. I don't find this song interesting at all, and it shouldn't be 9 minutes long. Then there is Star Blind, which is a pretty good song. It doesn't feel like it drags on, but this song doesn't really reach me as much. And then When the Wild Wind Blows, I do like the intro and the main verse of the song. It does sound really cool and epic, but the song doesn't really have a good payoff. There are some good solos, but after that the song just gets really boring and repetitive to me. It should have had a nasty breakdown section like in other epics like Sign of the Cross and Dance of Death, even though I did bash on this album quite a bit. It still has its epic moments. I do like the theme of this album, and when the songwriting is at its prime, that's when this album is amazing and epic. Out of those 5 epic songs in the second half, I find 2 of them to be really amazing. The first one is The Man Who Would Be King. This song has some really great melodies and it's a pretty heavy and fast-paced song. It also has some great soloing. This song is an example of a great epic on this album.
Searching for the answer now. It's something that he's managed to avoid up till now. Real conviction that he craves. He needs to find the answer sooner than later.
The best song on this album to me would have to be The Talisman. This song is one of Iron Maiden's best epics in my opinion. It has everything that this album should have been. A great epic atmosphere, amazing melodies, and some great songwriting that doesn't feel like it's too long and boring. This song is absolutely amazing. So The Final Frontier would have to be my second least favorite Iron Maiden album, mainly because of its songwriting flaws and Bruce Dickinson's weaker performance. But I do think the approach to this album was good and I do think it has its epic moments. There is a chance you might like this whole album. It's definitely not bad or unlistenable. Alright, from here on out, these albums are really great with barely any bad elements to them, no bad songwriting, and no bad performances. I find No Prayer for the Dying to be extremely underrated. I know it's the 90s and this album is a little more on the hard rock side, but to me this is still progressive metal. This wasn't a whole departure to another genre of music. I find the music to be really great on this album. Yeah, Bruce's voice does sound pretty rough and raspy, and sometimes he struggles to hit high notes, but he doesn't do a bad performance. Let's get the bad out of the way first. Many people bash on this album because of how corny it can be in some spots, but to me the only corny spots are in the 2 songs I don't like off here. Holy Smoke and Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter are a bit too corny to me and I'm not a fan of those songs, but everything else is really good. There are a lot of great unique sounding melodies on this album. Just listen to the chorus of Tail Gunner and Public Enemy No. 1. Those songs are really catchy and have some really nice melodies.
Fall on your knees today and pray the world will mend its ways. Get to your feet again.
You also have some really great songwriting on here. Just listen to like any middle section off this album. The solos are still really good, and there are lots of interesting musical elements like key changes and interesting melodies in those sections. The songwriting is still in the classic Maiden style to me. It's just not as progressive like the stuff before. A great example of an interesting middle section would be The Assassin. This song is kind of corny, but that solo section really makes up for it. I feel like many fans just only focus on Bruce's singing or the corny stuff on this album, instead of actually paying attention to the music. This is why this album is really underrated. The music is still great on this album. I really like the title track off of here. It's a pretty unique sounding song with great songwriting. Run Silent Run Deep is also really good. Hooks in You may be corny to some people, but I personally like it a lot, and a really unique sounding song would be Fate's Warning. This song sounds like it would have fit on Seventh Son. It sounds pretty similar to that album.
You can count on just one thing. When the time is
but my favorite song off here would have to be Mother Russia. This song is really theatrical and epic, even though it's only 5 minutes, but it definitely feels like an Iron Maiden epic. If you don't like this album, you at least need to check this song out. It's way different from the rest of the songs on here. Overall, I think No Prayer for the Dying is an extremely underrated and overlooked album in the Iron Maiden discography. The music is a lot better than most people think. I really recommend you give this another chance if you don't like it. Even though this album is pretty low on my list, I love this album. I find Dance of Death to also be really underrated. This one isn't talked about as much and I feel like there are some songs that are hidden gems. Now I have seen some fans that have disregarded this album because of the album cover, and I do agree, that album cover looks like a whole bunch of satanic abortions. It's very shitty. But you don't bash on an album only because of the album cover. Album covers are like the least important thing in records. You only care about the music, because that is what really matters. The music on Dance of Death is really amazing, and it's pretty unique sounding in the Iron Maiden discography. They use a lot of Celtic-style melodies on here, and there are a lot of songs that have a great epic atmosphere. Many fans don't see this, but this album is nearly as epic sounding as Brave New World. Bruce Dickinson sounds great on here with barely any straining. The production sounds really good. It's a lot more heavy and more produced than Brave New World, and the guitar work is also really great. The band works well as a three-piece. Now let's move on to the tracks. There are 2 filler tracks on here that I don't like, and it's mainly the reason why I rank this pretty low. Those being Wildest Dreams and Gates of Tomorrow. Those songs just sound off to me, and the melodies just don't make sense. If you remove those tracks, you get a great solid album. The album shouldn't have opened with Wildest Dreams, because this song right after it, Rainmaker, would have made a way better opener. That song is so amazing with many great melodies and guitar lines. To me, this is the opening track.
I know of the pain that you feel the same as me, and I dream of the rain as it falls upon the leaves, and the cracks in the ground, like the cracks are in our mind. They are sealed and are now far away.
There are so many epic sounding tracks on this album. Some of them are extremely underrated, especially in the second half. I really like Age of Innocence, which has a pretty heavy riff and a more dark atmosphere, and I think Face in the Sand is also really underrated. This song sounds really different and unique. It has a really dark and epic atmosphere, and the song is mostly a progression. There are a lot of build-up and breakdown moments in this song. Face in the Sand is one of the most underrated Maiden tracks ever.
Everybody's heroes tell everyone's lies. I wait for the signs. They tell the truth. I say the signs of the end.
My favorite tracks on here would have to be the 3 main epics, No More Lies, Passchendaele, and Dance of Death. No More Lies is really underrated. It has a great epic atmosphere and it's also a progression. It has a really nice intro and then it reprised that intro in the main parts of the song. This song is brilliant. Passchendaele is a pretty dark sounding epic. It's pretty different as well. It has an apocalyptic atmosphere and has some really unique songwriting. But my favorite song on the album has to be Dance of Death. This song has really amazing melodies and song structure. The guitar solos are really great on here. This song is just a perfect Iron Maiden epic to me, and is one of my favorite Maiden songs. Dance of Death is a really great and underrated album. More fans need to know how great this album is musically. It's only this low on my list because of the 2 filler tracks, and that I just prefer the other albums a tad bit more. But Dance of Death is still really amazing and is one of the most underrated Maiden records. The self-titled debut album is a really great and consistent album. The only things I don't like about it is the lackluster production and that some tracks don't really hold up to me as some other Maiden tracks, but there's not a song I dislike from here. What I really like about the Paul Di'Anno era of Maiden is that Steve Harris is able to take these punk-sounding songs and take it to the next level. This music sounded really heavy and technical for its time. You didn't have crazy guitar leads and technical drumming before. This album was pretty revolutionary for its time. The guitar work is great on this album. There is no Adrian Smith, but I do like Dennis Stratton a lot. He shines especially when the album goes in a more psychedelic direction like Charlotte the Harlot and Strange World. He actually wanted to go more into that direction after this album, but that wasn't what Iron Maiden was looking for, so that is why they kicked him out. But if you wanted some more psychedelic elements in Iron Maiden, this is the only album that has that. Strange World is such a unique Maiden song and is one of my favorite tracks from them. The atmosphere is unbelievable and the guitar leads are absolutely amazing.
The only place where you can dream, living here is not what it seems. Ship away, light in the sky.
The tracks on this album are really good. There aren't really any bad songs on here, but I do think that Running Free, Charlotte the Harlot, and Iron Maiden aren't the greatest tracks to me. I just don't find them as special as some of these other tracks. Prowler is a fantastic opening song. I love the guitar leads on there, and Sanctuary is also really great. I wish they would have originally included it in the album, but I'm glad it's in the remaster. Remember Tomorrow is also really great, and I am a huge fan of the instrumental Transylvania. It might be my favorite Iron Maiden instrumental. But the best track from this album would have to be Phantom of the Opera. What an epic song this is. There are so many iconic sections and badass guitar lines. The solos are just amazing. This is one of their most influential and best tracks they have ever wrote, right when they were kickstarting their career. Overall, this album is awesome and it is a great start to Iron Maiden. I just don't find this one to be as special as some of their other stuff, but it's a great start. This is one of the greatest debut albums of all time, along with Show No Mercy, Appetite for Destruction, Blizzard of Ozz, and Holy Diver. The X Factor is easily the most underrated and underappreciated album in the Iron Maiden discography. This album gets a lot of unnecessary hate. I know this is a Blaze Bayley album and it is the 90s, but this album is way different from Virtual Eleven. This album is really different from what Iron Maiden has ever done. This album is really dark and it's a lot more doomy and heavier in a few places. Iron Maiden were in a dark place at the time and they decided to write darker music. This type of music is what fits Blaze Bayley the best. as he is a more low-range aggressive vocalist. In my opinion, if Bruce Dickinson were singing these songs, it would kind of ruin the darker atmosphere of this album and might come across as a bit goofy. This album is just meant for a vocalist like Blaze, and I think that is why Steve Harris chose him. Many fans bash on this album because of Blaze Bayley, but they ignore the actual music, and for fans that have listened to the music, they would say that this is really boring. But I don't find this album boring. This is a really unique sounding album to me. The music is dark, but there are still some nice melodies on here, especially in the guitar work. There are lots of melodic guitar lines throughout this album, and Blaze is good at singing the main melodies of these songs. There is also some really great and interesting songwriting. Most of these tracks are pretty long, and they don't drag on. There are lots of interesting middle sections and solos. This album is probably the best guitar work that Janick Gers and Dave Murray have done together. This album definitely has some of Janick's best solos, and he also co-wrote a lot of tracks on here. There are a lot of slow and doom-sounding tracks on this album. They sound really dark and atmospheric, and they are the best at capturing the dark tone of the X Factor. The Aftermath is a really underrated Maiden track that has some awesome melodies and a badass Janick Gers solo. 2 AM is a cool song that is kind of a ballad, but it's a pretty doomy sounding track. And I am a really big fan of Fortunes of War. This is probably the darkest song from the album, that has some really dark lyrics and guitar melodies. This song is extremely underrated. Some other really underrated tracks from this album would be the really melodic Judgment of Heaven. This song has some really nice melodies and guitar lines. The Edge of Darkness is a really cool and dark song with a really badass riff. It kind of sounds like Hallowed Be Thy Name. And I think Blood on the World's Hands is another underrated track. This song is really unique because it has some cool guitar work and rhythms, but it has the only time that Steve Harris does a freaking bass solo. How cool is that? Another reason why you should like this album. But the best tracks on this album are the first 3 tracks, Sign of the Cross, Lord of the Flies, and Man on the Edge. Man on the Edge is a really fast and aggressive song with amazing guitar work. This song fucking rules. Lord of the Flies is a really melodic and catchy song, and Sign of the Cross. This is easily one of the greatest epics Iron Maiden has ever wrote. This song is really dark. It has the perfect ambient intro, and it has so many interesting sections throughout. I love the solos in the later part in the song. Sign of the Cross easily a top 10 Maiden track. But wait, we still have one more song to talk about, and even to those people who don't like this album, I strongly suggest you check this song out, and that is a B-side track. This is the B-side to Man on the Edge, and is definitely the best Iron Maiden B-side in my opinion. This definitely should have made the album. It would work well as the opening track, and that is the fast and aggressive as fuck Judgment Day. This song is really dark and has amazing vocals from Blaze Bayley, and it has some amazing solos from both Janick and Dave. You must check this song out.
What will you say? What will you say on Judgment Day? On Judgment Day! On Judgment Day!
Overall, The X Factor is an extremely underrated album. All of you that don't like this need to give this a second chance, and if you still don't like this album, listen to Judgment Day. This is pretty low on my list because I'm not a huge fan of Look for the Truth and The Unbeliever. I find Look for the Truth to be pretty boring, and The Unbeliever is a little too weird for me. but this album is still amazing. If you want a more in-depth analysis on this album, go check out my video I made about this album in my past channel, and also check out my review on all of the B-sides of this album. The X Factor needs more praise. Fear of the Dark is yet another underrated Iron Maiden album, and I consider this one to be the best one from the 90s. This album I feel like gets a lot of unnecessary hate. Many fans only focus on the title track, which is one of Iron Maiden's greatest songs ever, but they ignore everything else, saying it's just filler like No Prayer for the Dying. But yet again, these people don't actually focus on the music. The music is really good on this album, and it sounds pretty unique from the rest of the discography. The production is amazing, it sounds really heavy and dark, and it has one of Nico McBrain's best drum tones. This album musically you get a variety of things, either really dark and spooky sounding stuff, or really melodic stuff. You get a good taste of both in this album. People also say that Bruce's voice is pretty bad, because it still sounds pretty raspy, but his voice fits a lot better on here than in No Prayer for the Dying. Because of the album's dark tone, the raspy vocals fits in well with the music, and he also fixed his straining problem he had the album before. I find his voice to be great on this album. Janik Jers also plays really well on this album. This is also one of his best albums. Him and Dave Murray work really well together on here. There are a lot of unique sounding songs on here that are pretty different. One example would be Childhood's End. This song is really melodic and atmospheric, and it gives out a tone you don't really find in other Maiden records. This song is amazing and is very unique.
No hope, no life, just pain and fear. No food, no love.
But that is just one of the extremely underrated tracks from this album. There are so many underrated tracks like The Fugitive, the aggressive fast opening track Be Quick or Be Dead, Chains of Misery, Wasting Love, and then there's Judas Be My Guide. There are some tracks on here that I consider to be some of Iron Maiden's greatest tracks, and Judas Be My Guide is one of them. This song is short, but it's really punchy and melodic, and it has one of Iron Maiden's best choruses. The fact that this song isn't a single and is very unnoticed really doesn't make me happy.
Everything's wasted. Is that all that is? Can I go now? Judas, my guide, whispered in the night. Judas, my guide.
These tracks are just so amazing, and I cannot believe how unnoticed they are. But there are two tracks on here I consider to be some of Iron Maiden's greatest songs ever. They would make my top 5 list honestly. The first one is Afraid to Shoot Strangers. This song is a masterpiece. It's very melodic. It has beautiful guitar lines, and it has an amazing song structure, being soft in the first half and then aggressive in the second half. This song is so good. But the best track on here, I have to go with Everyone Else. Fear of the Dark is such a great classic. It has some of Iron Maiden's best melodies ever. It's very passionate, and it has an amazing atmosphere and some great guitar lines. The solo is also one of Iron Maiden's best solos. This song is a classic, and it deserves all the praise it gets.
Because you're sure there's someone there. Fear of the dark, fear of the dark. I have a constant fear that something's always near. Fear of the dark, fear of the dark. Have a phobia that someone's always there.
Even though this album has so many strong tracks, it does have 2 songs that absolutely suck. The Apparition is very boring and repetitive, but it does have a great solo, and Weekend Warrior is really boring with uninteresting melodies and bad songwriting. That song is way too long, but everything else is pretty good. If you want a more detailed analysis on this album, I also made a video reviewing this whole album. Fear of the Dark is very underrated, just like the other 90s albums, and these songs need to get noticed more. There's so much that fans are missing out on. what an improvement this was from the Final Frontier. I'm really impressed. This album barely has any boring sections or moments that drag on for too long. And this album is 90 fucking minutes. It's longer than the Final Frontier but has way more interesting moments and payoffs. Honestly, this album flies by fast. It doesn't really feel like 90 minutes to me. There's a lot of interesting stuff and variety in this album. It has some really long epic tracks, and it has some shorter punchier tracks. All 11 of these tracks are over 5 minutes long, but the songwriting is fantastic on here. Bruce Dickinson also does a much better performance on here than the Final Frontier. He doesn't sing high as much. He uses his lower range a lot more and he sounds great. He does strain when he sings high, but it doesn't happen often, so it isn't bad. The guitar work is also really great. I would say they were the most creative with this album with the three-piece. There are lots of overlapping solos and guitar lines. But the best thing about this album is the songwriting. These tracks are long for a reason, and they don't compile all of them together like in the Final Frontier. Instead, you get long tracks followed up by shorter tracks and vice versa. I really like how the tracks are ordered on here. It opens up perfectly with If Eternity Should Fail, which is a more mid-tempo song with some darker melodies. It has a really dark intro, which is the perfect way to open up this album, and it being 8 minutes long has some really great songwriting. It has a nice payoff in the second half when it gets really fast. This song is amazing. Then after that we get Speed of Light, which is also really awesome. It's a short punchy track with amazing guitar work. I will be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of The Great Unknown. It's not bad, but I do think it's a little bit boring, and Bruce kinda strains a lot in the song. But thank God it's not 9 minutes like songs from the Final Frontier. Instead it's only 6 minutes, and then we get to The Red and the Black. This song is 13 minutes, and it's amazing, but I will say I do think the first half kinda drags on for a bit. It's just a little repetitive, but then once the song gets going it's really good. Right after that is When the River Runs Deep. I'm a really big fan of this song, because it's really fast, and the songwriting is really fantastic. This song is about 6 minutes and it's fast all the way through. There are lots of great sections all throughout.
Is this the last together? Maybe this time now we stand together and we're holding the line here. There's nothing we can do, just sit here and wait. The die is cast, that is decided our fate.
And then we get to my favorite song from this album, The Book of Souls. This is one of the most perfect Iron Maiden epics ever. It's 10 minutes, and it has the most perfect songwriting. It has a cool, darker atmosphere, and it's slow in the first half and then fast in the second half. That's actually how Janek Jers writes his epics when he writes with Steve. To all the people that hate Janek Jers, he is a fantastic songwriter, as he co-writes the better songs from the modern era, like Dance of Death, Dream of Mirrors, The Talisman, and The Book of Souls. This song is a modern classic for Maiden. That's only the first half of this album. The second half opens up with Death or Glory, which is a great fast-paced track. Shadows of the Valley is extremely underrated. It's 7 minutes but it's very cool. It's pretty fast and it has some really cool melodies. This song should have gotten noticed more. Tears of a Clown is a really cool melodic song, and The Man of Sorrows is a pretty unique sounding track, but I will say it is a little disjointed. I wish the intro was the entire song, cause that intro sounds really melodic and depressing. The rest of the song is kinda weird. And then, Empire of the Clouds. This song is Iron Maiden's longest track, being 18 minutes long, and it is a masterpiece. Overall, The Book of Souls is a really solid and consistent album with amazing epic tracks and having lots of variety to it. This was a great return to form, and I hope they keep this up. Only Iron Maiden could make a 90-minute album feel shorter. Now we're getting into the classics. Peace of Mind is an amazing album and is no doubt a classic for the band. This was probably their first album where they have gotten really progressive, as these songs are longer and have more softer moments. This is one of their least heavier albums in my opinion. It doesn't really focus on the technical stuff like they have done before. Instead it focuses more on melody and atmosphere. You didn't really get that before. This album is one of Iron Maiden's more melodic albums. There are so many nice melodies on here, especially in choruses and guitar lines. Bruce Dickinson also does one of his best vocal performances ever. He sounds really great on here, and the guitar work and drumming is no doubt amazing. Nico McBrain was the right drummer for this change of sound. Even though I do think Clive Burr is better, he isn't really a progressive drummer like Nico is. Now this album isn't perfect. There's one song on here that I cannot stand. You know what I'm talking about. Quest for Fire. This song doesn't sound like the rest of the tracks on here. It's just lazily written, and the melodies kinda suck. But everything else on here is fantastic. The album opens up with Where Eagles Dare, which is a kick-ass progressive opening track. It's not as aggressive as songs like Aces High and Moonchild, but it still has some great melodies and progressive elements. Revelations is one of my favorite tracks on here. This song is pretty soft and progressive, but the melodies sound amazing. I love the guitar work and bass playing, and I love how this song was written. It has so many sections. I absolutely love this song. Die With Your Boots On is also really great. It's pretty underrated and it has some great melodies and guitar lines. My favorite song on here though would have to be The Trooper. That song is just a classic. I don't think I'll ever get sick of it. The guitar work is just phenomenal. And then after that is also one of my favorite songs on here. Still Life is so amazing. It's very melodic and has a great atmosphere. I absolutely love everything about this song. Then Sun and Steel is also a great song, but I really love the closing epic To Tame a Land. This is one of my favorite Iron Maiden epics. There are lots of unique musical elements in this song. It's really melodic and atmospheric, and especially in the second half it has tons of instrumental sections. This song is amazing. Overall, Peace of Mind is a very great album. It's only number 8 because of Quest for Fire. That's it. If there was a really good song that replaced it, then this album would probably be much higher. This album is pretty unique for Iron Maiden as this one is much more melodic. If you like more melodies in Iron Maiden, this is the album for you. The Number of the Beast is also a very classic album. Many people give this album lots of high regards, and people consider this the defining album of the heavy metal genre. I kinda agree. It definitely influenced metal a lot, but I would say Powerslave is a more accurate interpretation of heavy metal. But I see why people love this album so much. It's really punchy and aggressive, and straight to the point. In my opinion, this album has Bruce Dickinson's best vocal performance, back when he was young and his voice was fresh and new. The only reason I prefer this album over Peace of Mind is because I like every song. Yeah, Invaders and The Prisoner are a little bit corny and too melodic for how aggressive they are, but they are still good songs, and Gangland is a pretty great song. People only bash on it because it replaced Total Eclipse from making the album. I do think Total Eclipse is a better song, but it doesn't really fit on Number of the Beast. Gangland is more suited for the raw aggressive tone of the album. I would say Total Eclipse would fit better on Peace of Mind, because it is a really melodic and unique song. I really like the melodies and song structure on Total Eclipse. It's much more unique from anything they have done before. I guess Total Eclipse should have replaced Gangland because it's a better song, but Gangland is a more fast-aggressive song that more fits with the album style, and it has some great drumming from Clive Burt. You can't go wrong with Clive Burt, so stop hating on Gangland for dumb reasons. Every other song on this album are standouts. Children of the Damned is fantastic. The Number of the Beast is such a cool badass song. Run to the Hills is great. And you cannot possibly not like the most classic song from the band, Hallowed Be Thy Name. This song is a must listen. But guess what? There is a song I like better than Hallowed Be Thy Name on this album. My favorite song has to be 22 Acacia Avenue. The songwriting in this song is insane. There are so many badass sections, and this song is very catchy. The instrumentation is so good. I wish fans would praise this song as much as the hits from this album. That song is easily a top 10 Maiden song for me. It's just a total jam fest, with some of Steve Harris's most badass bass playing. 22 Acacia Avenue is so amazing. Overall, this album is fantastic and it's always a great listen. I don't find this album overrated at all, but there are some really fantastic albums I prefer over this. If you like Maiden more punchy and aggressive with Bruce on vocals, this is the album to listen to, and Power Slave. But this album is a classic with every band member doing a fantastic performance. From here on out, these 6 albums are what I consider to be masterpieces. Every song kicks ass, no filler, the whole entire album rules. I am a really big fan of Killers. If you like really punchy, aggressive, hardcore punk-influenced metal, you will love Killers. The tracks on here are short, punchy, and are densely packed full of technical instrumentation. I prefer this album over the debut album because I love every song. It's more heavy, technical, and has much better production. I just love how this album sounds. You don't really get this in other Maiden albums. This album easily has Clive Burr's best drumming, and you get a ton of great riffs from Adrian Smith and Dave Murray. Steve Harris also shreds all over the place on here. The bass is really loud. You cannot avoid it. Paul Di'Anno also sings really well on here. This lineup was one of their best lineups. There are 10 tracks on here. Yes, including Twilight Zone. You cannot have this album if it doesn't have Twilight Zone. And all of them are fantastic. Wrathchild is a perfect opener. Murders in the Rue Morgue is really catchy. Genghis Khan is a great instrumental. Innocent Exile was the first song Steve Harris wrote, and it's full of him shredding. My favorite tracks though are the more aggressive and densely packed ones. One of them is Purgatory. This song is so fast and hardcore, and it has some great melodies. You must listen to this song. Another song I really like from here would be the closing track Drifter. This song is pretty bluesy and catchy. I really like the riff and the melodies, and this song has some amazing songwriting. It's also pretty underrated. This song kicks ass. My favorite song on this album would have to be Killers. This song is so fucking amazing, it's pretty fast and it has a crazy riff. It's almost speed metal. This song has the most badass verse and chorus, and it has some really great songwriting. There are people out there that say this is the first thrash metal song. Not really. Purgatory fits that category more, and there are better examples that came out before this album. Killers is definitely my favorite song from the Paul Di'Anno era.
She's watching you bleed. Killer behind you. His bloodlusted eyes on his knee.
Overall, Killers is a masterpiece. It has no weak points whatsoever. Every song is amazing. This album is the best Maiden album for extreme metal fans wanting to get into Maiden. I consider this one to be their heaviest and most technical. And if you aren't a fan of Maiden, especially the Bruce Dickinson era, you will probably like this album. Killers is a fantastic album and is for people that want something punchy and straight to the point. A Matter of Life and Death. This one is one of Iron Maiden's more musically brilliant albums. This album really relies on its melodies and songwriting. Well, pretty much all Maiden albums are, but this one a bit more. This album is definitely more progressive and slower. It's nothing punchy like the 80s stuff. If you want to get into this album, better make sure you're more patient and into the actual music. This album also doesn't have a lot of standout tracks. The best way to listen to this is by listening to the whole album start to finish. It flows really nicely. Speaking about listening to this from start to finish, I think it's pretty bullshit that for the tour of this album they decided to play the whole entire album live. That's like a fuck you to the fans. I don't know why they would do that, especially if the album is less punchy and really progressive. And the album is 72 minutes long. You're basically just getting the crowd bored to death. It's not a great thing to do live. This album is only meant for a sit-down listen with your headphones, and it is always a great experience for me. Every track on this album is fantastic. You only get a few shorter tracks, but the rest are mostly epics. In fact, because most of the album are epics, the epics don't really feel like epic tracks, just regular tracks on the album. Think of it from the perspective of Dream Theater, where a long song is basically normal. The album opens up with Different World, which is a great punchy opener. It's very melodic and happy sounding. That's kinda the musical theme of this album. It has a lot more melodies and songs in a major key. You don't get that with Maiden. That's how this album is unique to me. Then there is These Colors Don't Run. It's more mid-tempo, but it has some great melodies. It also has a great middle section with some great solos. The Pilgrim is a really amazing song. It's one of their most punchy and aggressive tracks from the modern era. The riffs and melodies are awesome. The Longest Day is also great. It's a bit longer, but it doesn't waste any time. These tracks on this album don't waste any time at all in my opinion. Then there is the ballad Off Here Out of the Shadows. This ballad is amazing. It's very melodic and I love the acoustic work. One of the rare Iron Maiden ballads. After that we get to one of my favorite tracks off this album, and one of the most badass sounding Iron Maiden songs, The Reincarnation of Benjamin Brigg. This is one of the more darker sounding tracks off here. It's pretty slow and heavy. I absolutely love that riff. The melodies sound badass as fuck, and I absolutely love that middle section. This song is a must listen if you are listening to this album. It's a nice change of pace from the other tracks.
Why should these
After that amazing track we get to the longest track from the album at 9 minutes, For the Greater Good of God. This is a pretty cool epic. It's kinda similar to The Longest Day, but maybe a bit more interesting. This song is cool. Lord of Light is fantastic. It's pretty fast and has some great vocals from Bruce. He sounds pretty great on this album. This is the last album where he still had his high register. After this it's totally gone. The final track, The Legacy, is a pretty cool song. I like the intro and main parts of the song, and then it goes pretty fast in the second half, just like most Janek Jur's epics. He's a great songwriter. My favorite song off this album would have to be Brighter Than 1,000 Suns. How badass is this epic? It's pretty dark and heavy, with some great vocals and guitar playing, and the middle section is fantastic. There are so many interesting parts. This song is brilliant and is one of their best epics. Overall, I love this album, and it is absolutely brilliant. Every song is fantastic and the album flows really well. I wish this album had a bit more praise. If you like more conceptual progressive sounding music, this album would be great. Brave New World. I fucking love this album. This might be the greatest comeback in the history of heavy metal, right at the year 2000, and being one of the strongest albums Maiden has ever put out. This album is really strong. Bruce Dickinson's voice is back to form after sounding a bit washed up in the 90s. It sounds a lot more fresh on here. The production sounds pretty raw, but it also sounds fresh and amazing. You may think this album is a return to form from the 80s. It is, but it's pretty different from the 80s albums. This one is a lot more progressive and musical. Most tracks are a lot longer on here, and there are more softer moments, but this album is one of the most epic sounding albums Maiden has ever put out. The melodies are so amazing and uplifting on here. It didn't really sound like this before, and the guitar work on here is absolutely phenomenal. The three-piece works really well on here. Yes, Janek Jurs contributes a lot on this album and he sounds great. Every track on here is fucking amazing. It's a very consistent album, and it has lots of variety to it, from short punchy tracks to softer longer epics. This album is solid all the way through. The album opens up with The Wicker Man, which is a kick-ass opener. The riff is kinda similar to Running Wild from Judas Priest, but I don't really care, it fits really well with the song. The melodies and solos sound amazing on here, and I really like that final chorus at the very end of the song. Then we get to Ghost of the Navigator, which is a fucking epic as hell song. It's very melodic, and the songwriting is very interesting. It has a lot of verses and choruses. This song is just packed full of melodies and heavier moments. This song is a must listen. Then we get to one of my favorite tracks from this album, Brave New World. This song is very melodic. The melodies are so amazing on here, especially in the chorus, but this song really shines on the solo. The solo played by Janek Jurs sounds so amazing. Most fans won't even believe that's him playing cause it sounds so good. Then we get to Blood Brothers, which is a pretty unique song. It's more soft and it's more driven by keyboards and acoustic guitars, but it sounds really amazing. The melodies sound great in this song. The Mercenary is a cool punchy track, and then we get to my favorite song off this album, Dream of Mirrors. This is a 9-minute epic, and it sounds phenomenal. It's very epic and melodic. I love the intro and the main melodies of the song, and it has a cool second half payoff. This song is amazing and another one of their best epics.
I've been dreaming black and white. I've been dreaming
After that we get to The Fallen Angel, which is another short punchy song. This one has a really badass middle section. Then we get to the other epic from this album, The Nomad. This song is really cool and unique. It's more dark and it has a lot of interesting songwriting. I especially like the second half of the song, which is mostly a build-up. Out of the Silent Planet is also really amazing. It's pretty catchy and more radio-friendly. The thin line between love and hate is really amazing to me. This song has some of the greatest melodies Iron Maiden has ever wrote in my opinion. The guitar solos are so melodic and beautiful, and it's just a perfect way to close off this album. This song is really good. Overall, Brave New World is such an amazing and epic album and is definitely one of the strongest albums Iron Maiden has ever put out. This album really shines on the melodies and songwriting. This whole album is just brilliant.
Beat the warning, the sound of the drums. Set the beacons of fire for the more. Call to arms all the men far and wide. Have to fight now for dynasty, pride and state.
God damn. The Book of Souls already proved that Iron Maiden has still got it 40 years deep into their career, but Senjutsu proves it much further. Senjutsu is a modern Maiden masterpiece. They went into the studio and wrote a really creative, diverse, and well-produced record. Now sadly, a lot of cunts seem to think otherwise, saying this album is terrible and boring. The past 6 albums Maiden has been putting out all have seen their fair share of hate, but not as much as what Senjutsu has been getting, but I am here to tell you that this is their best record since Seventh Son. I feel that this album incorporates the sound of modern Iron Maiden in the best way possible. It is really long, just like all of the other albums during this era, but Senjutsu is long for a reason, and it doesn't drag. Yes, all of the songs are mainly mid-tempo or slow, with only one fast song, but the songs were written so well that they serve their purpose and blend really well with each other. The production is top-notch on Senjutsu. I love how the guitars and drums were mixed. The drums feel very crisp and the guitars sound heavy but also raw. Kevin Shirley makes this album sound almost as good as an Iron Maiden record produced by Martin Birch. What I also love about Senjutsu is the creativeness and diversity in the songs. There are some songs like Senjutsu, The Time Machine, and The Parchment that feels very not Maiden-like and original. Some songs are what you would expect from this era in Iron Maiden, like Stratego, The Writing on the Wall, and Days of Future Past. You get a phenomenal ballad that is Darkest Hour, and you get some songs that feel very dark like The X Factor, Believe It or Not, such as Hell on Earth, Death of the Celts, and Lost in a Lost World, all with melodies where you can imagine Blaze Bayley singing. The album opens up with Senjutsu, which couldn't have been a better opener for this album. The song is really mid-tempo and progressive, with a powerful chorus. The song also feels very tribal and has some more out-of-the-box sounding melodies. Continuing on is Stratego, which is what you would expect from Iron Maiden nowadays, a song like El Dorado and Speed of Light. But this song is amazing and is definitely better than those songs. The Writing on the Wall is my favorite from the first half of Senjutsu. I really love the overall atmosphere, and the main riff and chord progressions are very creative and have a western flair to them. You also get a really melodic chorus and an awesome solo from Adrian Smith.
Have you seen the writing on the wall? Have you seen that writing? Can you see the writers on the stone?
We move on to Lost in a Lost World, one of the 4 epics on Senjutsu written solely by Steve Harris. This one really has an X Factor feel to it. It specifically gives me Look for the Truth vibes. This song incorporates all of the elements from the Blaze era and makes it better, especially with Bruce on vocals. The song has a lot of progressive tendencies in the first half, and once the chorus kicks in it sounds very X Factor-ish. Bruce does have a rough time during the chorus sadly. His performance on this album is really great. but his high range is completely gone. However, his mid-range drastically improved from before, giving him much more of a punch. Although most of the notes he sings on Lost in a Lost World are high, he rarely sings high at all during this record, and that was something I really wanted Iron Maiden to do. Days of Future Past is the fastest and shortest song on the album. It's a song reminiscent of The Mercenary and The Pilgrim. The main riff really kicks ass, and the chorus is really powerful. We then move on to The Time Machine, which is another unique song from this album. The song feels very theatrical and progressive, and I absolutely love the melodies, especially in the second half. Now, a lot of fans claim that Iron Maiden keep ripping themselves off in this album, using very similar guitar melodies from previous albums, and sadly that is kind of true for The Time Machine. The intro is literally the talisman, and the guitar line from the second half is almost identical to The Edge of Darkness. However, what makes them sound different in The Time Machine is theme and atmosphere. They also use a different key for this song, being in D minor instead of E. Then we switch over to the second half of Senjutsu, starting off with Darkest Hour. In my opinion, their best ballad. I just love the melodies and the guitar work. The song was just written so well, and it really leaves an impact. Yes, some parts of the song do kind of sound like Alone Again from Dokken, Razor Fist. But that's only one section in the song. Idiot and Darkest Hour has a completely different atmosphere than Alone Again. The song is fantastic, and then we move on to what I like to call the Steve Harris Trio Magnum Opus. 3 songs in a row, over 10 minutes, solely written by Steve Harris. These 3 songs are definitely the best ones from Senjutsu. All are super epic and amazing. Starting them off is my favorite song from this album, Death of the Celts. This song is basically The Klansman Part 2. It sounds like it would directly follow up that song. That's fucking awesome that Iron Maiden decided to do this. The song starts with a badass bass intro, and it leads to the main part of the song, which is pretty mid-tempo, but man, it hits hard. Bruce Dickinson sounds absolutely badass. He only sings lower notes, and it's the kind of vocals he should be doing at his age. The middle section, however, is the highlight of the song for me. You get some Celtic-style guitar melodies, but then the solos come in, which trades from Janik Jers to Dave Murray and Adrian Smith. All 3 of these solos are so fucking amazing, especially the one from Dave Murray. The next epic is The Parchment, another song that kicks absolute ass. What I love about this song is that it's very original for Iron Maiden. They never wrote a song like this. Basically, the whole song is this heavy slow riff that repeats and progresses with a faster section towards the end. Really similar to a song like Roads to Madness by Queensryche. I absolutely love this song. Throughout the song you get different vocal melodies and solos throughout. The whole song is just a crushing jam fest. And finally, we reach the last song, Hell on Earth. What a way to close off this album. It's another song that feels like the X Factor. I get Sign of the Cross and The Edge of Darkness vibes from here, but this song is a little more melodic and uplifting. It starts out with another awesome bass intro really reminiscent of the X Factor, and then the whole song is a mid-paced gallop with excellent vocals from Bruce Dickinson, delivering some melodic melodies. This song is phenomenal and a perfect way to close off Senjutsu.
I wish I could go back. I'll never be the same again. But for all the past, it's hell on earth.
Overall, Senjutsu is a certified masterpiece, delivering some very creative songwriting and amazing performances. What an album, especially for a band in their 60s, for crying out loud. If you don't like this, or if it hasn't reached you, I highly recommend you give it a few more chances. This is definitely a grower kind of album for Iron Maiden.
There's a time to live and a time to die. When it's time to meet the maker. There's a time to live, but isn't it strange? As soon as you're born, you're dying.
Here we are to the holy trinity of Iron Maiden albums. These 3 albums are some of my favorite heavy metal albums of all time. They are absolutely flawless and always have a special place to me. The first one at the number 3 spot we are talking about is Seventh Son. This album sounds fucking amazing. That production alone is one of my favorite tones ever. The guitars sound really clean and well produced. The drums sound awesome, and the keyboards are the main element that makes this album stand out. Personally, I like keyboards in metal a lot since I'm a power metal fan, and I love me some loud keyboards in Iron Maiden. It's a pretty subjective opinion, which is why some fans don't like this, but to me this sounds phenomenal. This album is really conceptual, since it's a concept album, but the music doesn't waste any time at all like some concept albums. This album is really musical, the riffs and guitar lines are off the charts, and there are so many epic moments. Bruce Dickinson also does an amazing performance, even though his voice does kinda sound burned out from all of the intense touring. But it's not washed like in No Prayer for the Dying. This album's overall sound is just timeless, and is one of the reasons why I have it as one of my favorite albums of all time. Barely any other albums sound like this. There are 8 tracks on here which are all really amazing, no weak points at all. The album opens up with probably my second favorite Iron Maiden opener, Moonchild. This song is so badass, it has one of the best intros to a song ever, and it explodes into this really conceptual sounding verse and chorus. This song is really fast and I love the melodies. The guitar solos also sound fucking amazing. This song is easily a highlight.
Moonchild, hear the music scream out. Moonchild, open the 7th seal.
Then we get to my favorite song off this album, Infinite Dreams. This song would easily make my top 10. I love how this song sounds and the way it was structured. It's pretty heavy on the keyboards as it's a more slow and softer song, but it's very melodic and anthemic. I absolutely love that chorus. Steve Harris has some really cool bass lines in this song, and I especially love the second half of the song where it gets a lot faster. I love the riffs and guitar lines in this section. This song is just fucking amazing and it just has to be my favorite song off here. What a phenomenal song that is. Then we get to Can I Play With Madness. It's a more catchy and radio-friendly song, and it kinda steers away from the concept. But this song is awesome. The melodies sound amazing. The Evil That Men Do is also really fucking good. It's another hit single off here and it is very anthemic and fast. The melodies are so good, and the solos are amazing. And then we get to the epic off this album, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. This song is a fucking amazing epic. I love how it was structured. It's pretty mid-tempo and anthemic in the first third. Then the second third is really ambient and atmospheric. It's mostly just a build-up, and it builds up to one of the best payoffs in an Iron Maiden epic ever. The final third of this song is just instrumental goodness. There are tons of solos and guitar lines, and it is really melodic. It's what really makes this song amazing. That song is such an amazing epic. Then we get to the prophecy, which I find to be really underrated. Some fans shit on this song for some reason. I don't get why. This song is really atmospheric and anthemic. I absolutely love the melodies on here, and I love the acoustic outro. What a unique song this is. Dave Murray is a great songwriter. The Clairvoyant is also very unique. It is entirely driven by melodies and guitar lines. Everything sounds amazing on here, and then the album closes with Only the Good Die Young, which is a fast gallop. This song has some amazing melodies, and it is a great way to close off this album. Overall, this album is very amazing. It sounds phenomenal and has some of Iron Maiden's greatest songwriting. If you want much more musical elements in Iron Maiden, this is the album for you. This is easily one of the more melodic Iron Maiden albums. This album is amazing, and I consider it one of the greatest metal albums ever made, mainly because of its unique sound and amazing melodies. Power Slave is definitely the fan favorite Iron Maiden album. Most people say this is the best one, as it was really successful and memorable. I agree with everything that people say about this album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time. This isn't as musical or atmospheric like Seventh Son or Peace of Mind. Instead, it is a lot more focused on the heavier and more catchy stuff like A Number of the Beast. Only it's a lot better and more consistent. This album is a classic. It doesn't waste any time at all, and it has some of the best performances from every band member. Adrian and Dave play some of their best riffs and solos, and Bruce Dickinson does one of his best vocal performances. He sounds outstanding on here. Nico's drumming is fantastic, and Steve Harris shreds all over this album. The bass is really loud on here. The songwriting is amazing on here. It's really heavy and technical like Number of the Beast, but it feels a lot more complete and polished. The catchy moments don't feel disjointed like Invaders and The Prisoner. The music is just 100% perfect on this album. All 8 tracks on here are masterpieces. I love all of these songs, and they flow really well on here. This album has a really great flow to it. It never loses momentum. The album opens up with one of Maiden's best openers, Aces High. This song is a classic and I absolutely love it. It's very fast and it has some amazing vocal melodies. The solo is also really great. Then it follows up perfectly with 2 Minutes to Midnight, which is a really catchy song. The main riff is very memorable, and the chorus is awesome. This song is amazing. Then we follow up with the instrumental, Lost for Words. I really like this instrumental. It's full of really catchy riffs and guitar lines, and I love the groove of the song. I love this instrumental. Then we get to Flash of the Blade. Just like Aces High, this one is also pretty fast and has amazing melodies. I really like the middle section with the dual guitar harmonies. And then we get to The Duelists. This is one of my favorite Maiden songs, and it's really underrated. This song is really catchy, and it has a really long middle section that drags the song to 6 minutes. You must like this. After that we get to Back in the Village, which is also pretty underrated. It's really fast and it has some amazing melodies. I find this song really catchy and amazing. And then we get to the 2 epics off here, the first one being Power Slave. This song is so amazing and badass. It's a lot darker, and you can totally tell the Egyptian theme on here by the music. The middle section is really amazing as well. It has one of the best solos from the album while Steve Harris plays a badass bass line. Power Slave is a must-listen from this album.
Into the abyss I fall, the eye of horrors. Into the eyes of the night, watching me go. Green is the cat's eye that glows in this temple.
And then, we get to the magnum opus on this album, and one of the greatest songs ever, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This 13-minute epic is my second favorite Iron Maiden song, and it is a masterpiece. It doesn't waste any time at all. It starts out immediately with the main riff, no intro. I wish the Final Frontier was like that. And the first part of the song is mostly a mid-tempo gallop groove with some awesome melodies, then in the middle it's really quiet and ambient. It's mostly just a bass line, but it sounds really unique, and then there is a really badass instrumental section that has some amazing solos, and then it goes back to the main part of the song. What a masterpiece this song is. This song is essential for getting into Iron Maiden. Overall, Power Slave is easily a masterpiece and is one of the greatest metal albums of all time. This album is very consistent and it never loses momentum. Every track is punchy and doesn't waste any time. This is an essential album for heavy metal. Somewhere in Time. This album is very special to me. It's not only my favorite Iron Maiden album, it's my favorite album of all time. In my opinion, this album is perfect in every way. It is the perfect metal album, at least to my taste. What I love most about music are melodies. If there is a really good melody in a song, I tend to really like it. Being a fan of power metal and AOR, I'm a big sucker for melodic stuff in general. This album to me has the perfect melodies. Everything is very melodic on here. When it comes to guitar riffs, vocal melodies, and solos, the melodies on here just really connect with me on a level that most metal albums don't have. I love every single second of this album. I also think this album is perfect in its songwriting. There are a ton of longer tracks and these songs feel totally perfect for their run time. This is also perfect in guitar work, drumming, bass playing, vocals, and production. This album has my favorite guitar sound of all time. It sounds very unique on its own. No other albums sound like it, and the guitar work is absolutely perfect on here. The solos are so phenomenal and perfect. Nico McBrain's best drum performance is on this album in my opinion. His tone sounds great and he gets the job done. Bruce Dickinson's vocals are outstanding. Even though they do go downhill from here, his voice sounds magical. And Steve Harris's bass is still really loud and audible as always. He plays really well on here. This album also has the perfect variety when it comes to songwriting. It has really fast and aggressive songs, more catchy songs, epics, and some softer moments. This album has the perfect variety to keep you interested. This album also has guitar synthesizers. I really like synthesizers and it is a pretty subjective opinion. That's why this album doesn't hold up with some fans as much as others. But the synthesizers are what makes this album special. I love how they sound. The album opens up with my favorite Maiden song of all time, Caught Somewhere in Time. The song off the bat begins with an amazing guitar melody with the synthesizers in the background, and then the song explodes into this speed metal gallop with some amazing riffs. The melodies sound outstanding on here, and it has my favorite Maiden solo. That solo is so long and perfect. I don't know any other solos that are on that level amazing. This song is amazing and I love everything about it. then, the album follows up perfectly with Wasted Years, one of their most catchy songs. The intro riff is very memorable and it sounds amazing, and the whole song is very melodic and catchy. Praise Adrian Smith for his outstanding songwriting. He also wrote this next song, Sea of Madness. This one is very underrated. It's not as uplifting as the tracks before, but it's still very melodic and atmospheric. I love the choruses and the middle section is so good. The bass line and vocal melodies sound phenomenal. This song is still perfect like the other ones. Then we get to Heaven Can Wait, which is another perfect song, and one of my favorites off here. It's a 7-minute epic, and every second of it is amazing. It's very fast and melodic. The chorus is very catchy, and that middle section stands out in this song. Those crowd get-together type of vocals sound absolutely beautiful. One of my favorite moments from this album, and the solos kick a lot of ass. This song is another example of Maiden at their very best.
Heaven can wait, heaven can wait, heaven can wait, heaven can wait till another day. Heaven can wait, heaven can wait, heaven can wait, heaven can wait till another day.
And then we get to another one of my favorites from here, The Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner. The guitar melodies on here are crazy good. The song is very fast and aggressive, and it has some of my favorite Iron Maiden melodies ever. I absolutely love that chorus, and the solos and guitar lines are absolutely phenomenal. This song is amazing and it has perfect songwriting.
Push myself on.
What an amazing and underrated song that is. And then we move on to Stranger in a Strange Land, another outstanding song. It's more mid-tempo and a bit softer, but the melodies still are amazing. I really love the more ambient middle section with the guitar lines. That's an amazing section. We then move on to Deja Vu, which is pretty unique. It's pretty fast, but the riffs and melodies sound really melodic. It doesn't really sound like anything they have done before. Deja Vu is a very unique song and I love it a lot. And the album closes off perfectly with one of their greatest epics ever, Alexander the Great. This song is so badass and atmospheric. I love the intro and main parts of the song. The melodies are so amazing, and I love the solo section. One of the greatest sections in Iron Maiden. This song is absolutely perfect. Overall, this album is perfect. It has everything I love about heavy metal. Amazing melodies, heavy riffs, outstanding solos, amazing vocals, perfect production, and variety. Every good thing comes together on here, and that's why it's my favorite album of all time. Alright, so that wraps up this insanely long ranking on Iron Maiden. I really love this band. It was the first metal band I got into and I loved heavy metal ever since. I really praise Iron Maiden and they will never get old to me, and I'm pretty sure Somewhere in Time would remain my favorite album of all time until I die. Hopefully, if you liked this video, please make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like these. Iron Maiden are one of the kings of heavy metal.
Subscribe to the
Heavy metal is the law.
No!